I'd been interested in urban exploration for years, documenting abandoned buildings and forgotten places across Ontario. It started as a photography hobby, but somewhere along the way I got drawn into the online communities forums where people shared locations, swapped stories, posted photos of places most people would never see. Most of it was harmless, just enthusiasts sharing their passion. But like anything on the internet, if you dug deep enough, you found the darker corners. I was browsing a forum late one night in February, the kind of night where the temperature drops below -20 and the windows frost over, and you can't sleep because the wind is screaming against the house. I was looking through a thread about abandoned industrial sites in southern Ontario when I noticed a post that seemed out of place. No photos, no description, just a set of coordinates and a URL. The username was a random string of numbers and letters, and the account had been created that same day. I almost scrolled past it, almost, but something made me copy the URL and paste it into my browser. The page loaded slowly, my internet struggling with whatever data was being transferred, and then the video player appeared, black at first, before the image resolved into a live stream. It showed a basement, concrete walls, stained and cracked with age, the kind you see in old buildings that were built before proper waterproofing was a thing. The floor was bare concrete too, rough and uneven. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting moving shadows across the walls. The light was harsh and yellow, creating stark contrast between light and dark. The camera was fixed in position, pointing at a metal door in the corner of the room. The door was gray, industrial-looking, with no visible handle on this side. It looked heavy, the kind of door you'd see in a utility room or a mechanical space. There was no sound except for a faint humming, like old electrical wiring or a fluorescent light ballast. The hum was constant, never varying in pitch or intensity. I turned up my volume, listening for anything else, voices, footsteps, breathing, but there was nothing. Just that steady electrical hum. I watched for maybe 5 minutes, waiting for something to happen. The bulb continued to sway, creating subtle shifts in the shadows. I could see dust particles in the air, visible in the harsh light, but nothing changed. No movement, no sound except that hum. I checked the URL again, looking for any clue about where this might be. The domain was unfamiliar, registered through some overseas service that specialized in anonymity. There was no identifying information anywhere. I went back to the forum thread to see if anyone had commented, if anyone knew what this was. But there were no replies yet, just that single post with the coordinates and URL. I returned to the stream and kept watching. 10 minutes, 15. The bulb swayed, the shadows moved, the hum continued. I started to feel stupid for wasting my time on what was probably just someone's art project or a prank. I was about to close the tab when the door opened. It happened suddenly, without any warning sound. One moment the door was closed, the next it was swinging inward, pushed by something I couldn't see. The opening revealed only darkness beyond, so complete that the harsh light from the bulb didn't penetrate it at all. And then a figure stepped into frame. They were backlit by whatever was behind that door, appearing first as nothing more than a silhouette, dark against darker. I couldn't make out any features, couldn't tell if they were male or female, young or old. They were just a human-shaped shadow standing in the doorway. They stood there for a long time, 30 seconds, a minute, perfectly still, facing the camera. I could feel my heart beating faster, could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing up. This wasn't a recording. This was happening right now, in real time, and whoever this was, they knew the camera was there. They were performing for it. Then they raised one hand. Slowly, deliberately, they raised their right hand and waved at the camera. Not a friendly wave, not the casual gesture you'd give to a friend. This was slow and measured, their hand moving side to side in an exaggerated arc. Once, twice, 3 times. And then they stepped back into the darkness and the door swung closed. I slammed my laptop shut so hard I was surprised the screen didn't crack. My hands were shaking. I sat there in my dark room, listening to the wind outside, trying to process what I'd just seen. It could have been anything. A performance piece, an ARG, some kind of elaborate prank, but something about it felt wrong. The way that figure had stood there, perfectly still. The way they'd waved, like they were acknowledging me specifically, like they knew I was watching. I tried to sleep but couldn't. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about that basement, that figure, that deliberate wave. Around 4 in the morning, I finally drifted off, but my dreams were full of concrete walls and swaying light bulbs and doors opening into darkness. The next day, I couldn't help myself. I went back to the forum to find the thread, to see if anyone had figured out what it was or where it was located. The thread was gone. Not just deleted, completely wiped, like it had never existed. I searched the forum for the username, for the coordinates, for any reference to the post. Nothing. I checked my browser history to make sure I hadn't imagined it. The forum URL was there, but the specific thread URL returned a 404 error. I sat there staring at my screen, and then I did something stupid. I typed the live stream URL directly into my browser. It loaded. The stream was still running. Same basement, same concrete walls, same swaying bulb, same metal door. But something was different. There was writing on the wall. It was spray painted in large letters, dark against the gray concrete. I had to squint to read it in the harsh, moving light. And when I finally made out what it said, I felt ice water run down my spine. It was my address, my full address, street number, street name, city, postal code. I stared at it, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't possible. There was no way they could know where I lived. I'd used a VPN, I'd been careful, I'd never posted any personal information on that forum. But there it was, my address, written on that basement wall, visible in a live stream that anyone could access. I closed the browser and immediately called the police. The officer who answered didn't seem particularly concerned at first. I tried to explain what I'd seen: the live stream, the basement, the figure, my address on the wall. I could hear the skepticism in her voice as she asked for the URL. I gave it to her and waited while she pulled it up. "Sir, I'm not seeing anything," she said. "The page won't load." "Try again," I said. "It was just working." She did. Same result. "I'm getting an error message. The page doesn't exist." I pulled out my own laptop and tried the URL. She was right. Error 404, page not found. "Are you sure you didn't just imagine this?" she asked gently. "No, I saw it. I watched it. Someone put my address on that wall. She took down all my information and said she'd file a report, but I could tell she didn't believe me. Why would she? I had no proof. No screenshots, no recording, nothing but my word that I'd seen something that no longer existed." After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and tried to think. I should have taken screenshots, should have recorded the stream, but I'd been too freaked out, too focused on closing the browser and making it stop. I checked my email, my social media, my other accounts, looking for any sign that I'd been hacked or doxed. Everything seemed normal. I ran virus scans and malware checks. Nothing. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with finding that stream again. I checked the URL compulsively, dozens of times a day. Always the same result: 404 error. I searched the forum, even created new accounts to access restricted areas, looking for any mention of those coordinates or that basement. Nothing. A week passed, then 2. I started to convince myself that maybe the police were right. Maybe I had imagined it, or maybe it had been a prank that had gone offline. I tried to move on, but I couldn't shake the image of that figure standing in the doorway, the way they'd waved, the deliberate, knowing quality of that gesture. It was 3 weeks later when I checked the URL again. It loaded. The stream was back. Same basement, same swaying bulb, same door, but the wall had been repainted. The address was gone, covered over with fresh gray paint. The basement looked exactly as it had when I'd first found the stream, like nothing had ever been written there. I watched for maybe 2 minutes, my hand hovering over the close button, and then I saw it. Movement in the corner of the frame, just at the edge where the concrete wall met the floor. Something small and dark, partially hidden in shadow. I leaned closer to my screen, trying to make out what it was. It was a photograph, pinned to the wall with a piece of tape, and even from the distance of the camera, even with the poor quality of the stream, I could see what it showed. It was a photo of my apartment building, taken from across the street. Recent, based on the cars parked outside and the snow on the ground. I slammed the laptop shut again and immediately checked my windows, making sure the blinds were closed. I sat in my apartment with all the lights off, listening to every sound from the hallway outside, every footstep from the apartment above. I didn't call the police this time. What would I tell them? That a live stream that had previously disappeared and that they couldn't verify had now shown me a photo of my building? They'd think I was crazy. Instead, I watched. For the next 3 days, whenever I was home, I watched that stream. The photograph stayed on the wall, the door never opened, the bulb continued to sway, and that electrical hum continued, constant and unchanging. On the 4th day, the stream went offline, this time for good. The URL still exists. I just checked it before sitting down to write this, but it returns a 404 error. Page not found. I still live in the same apartment. I thought about moving, but where would I go? And what's to say they wouldn't find me again? Sometimes, late at night, I can't help myself. I type in that URL, even though I know what I'll find. Error 404, page not found. But I'm terrified of the day it loads again. Terrified of what I'll see on that basement wall, what new message will be waiting for me. Because whoever was running that stream, whoever put my address on that wall, whoever took that photograph of my building, they know where I am. And I think they're just waiting, patient and deliberate, like that wave in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to open that door again and show me what comes next. I was broke and looking for cheap furniture when my friend Marcus told me about the online auctions on the dark web. He worked in IT and was always messing around with Tor browsers and encrypted messaging, things I barely understood. He said you could find estate sales and police auctions there if you knew where to look. People selling off belongings from houses where someone had died, unclaimed property, that sort of thing. The prices were usually good because most people didn't know these auctions existed. I was skeptical at first, but Marcus walked me through setting up a secure browser and creating an account on one of the sites. It looked like any other auction platform, just with a darker interface and less polish. He showed me how to browse the listings, how to bid, how to arrange payment through cryptocurrency. It all seemed more complicated than it was worth, but I was curious. The auction he'd mentioned was for estate items from a house in Kenora, a small town in northwestern Ontario, about 4 hours from where I lived in Thunder Bay. According to the listing description, the owner had died with no surviving family, and the estate was being liquidated to cover outstanding debts. Most of the items were exactly what you'd expect: furniture, old books, kitchen dishes, outdated electronics. Nothing special, but one listing caught my attention. It was titled simply, "Personal Effects, Owner Deceased, No Family Claimed." The photo showed a cardboard box, sealed with brown packing tape, no description beyond what was in the title. The bidding had started at $1 and was currently at $5. Something about it intrigued me. Maybe it was the mystery of not knowing what was inside. Maybe it was the morbid curiosity about someone's life being reduced to a sealed box on an anonymous auction site. I don't know, but I placed a bid, $10. I checked back over the next few days, expecting to be outbid, but no one else seemed interested. The auction closed and I'd won for my $10 bid. I received a message through the site asking for a delivery address, and I provided my apartment information. Payment was processed through some cryptocurrency exchange Marcus had set up for me, and then I waited. 2 weeks passed and I'd almost forgotten about the auction when the box arrived. It was sitting outside my apartment door when I got home from work on a Tuesday evening. A plain cardboard box, sealed with brown tape, exactly like the photo in the listing. No return address, no shipping label, just my address written in black marker on the top. I brought it inside and set it on my kitchen table. The box was lighter than I'd expected, and when I shook it gently, I could hear things shifting inside, not heavy, not glass, just something sliding around. I grabbed a knife and cut through the tape. Inside, wrapped in old newspaper, were photographs. Dozens of them, all printed on standard photo paper, all in color. I pulled them out one by one, laying them across the table. They were all of the same house, taken from different angles, different distances, different times of day. Some showed the front of the house, the familiar white siding and green shutters. Others showed the backyard, the detached garage, the garden my mother used to maintain. Some were taken from across the street, some from the neighbor's yard, some from what looked like inside a parked car. And I recognized the house immediately. It was my parents' house, the house where I'd grown up, where I'd lived until I was 18 and left for college. My hands started shaking as I went through the photographs more carefully. Some of them showed my old bedroom window, the one on the second floor facing the backyard. Some showed the front porch where my dad used to sit and read the paper on Sunday mornings. Some showed the driveway, the fence line, the big maple tree in the front yard. I turned one of the photos over. On the back, written in pencil in neat, careful handwriting, was a date and time. The 15th of July 2019, 6:47 p.m. I checked another. The 3rd of August 2019, 2:23 p.m. Another. The 22nd of November 2019, 9:15 a.m. I went through all of them, checking the dates. They spanned several years. The oldest was from 2015, when I was still living at home. The most recent was dated just 3 days before the box had arrived at my apartment. I felt sick. Someone had been photographing my parents' house for years, taking pictures from different locations, different times, documenting it like it was some kind of surveillance project. And now those photographs had ended up in an estate sale, in a sealed box that I'd randomly bid on. I pulled out my phone and called my parents. My dad answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, kiddo, what's up?" "Dad, this is going to sound weird, but have you noticed anyone hanging around the house lately? Taking pictures, maybe?" "Taking pictures? No, why?" I tried to explain without sounding crazy. Told him about the auction, about the box, about the photographs of their house. He went quiet on the other end. "You're sure they're of our house?" "I'm positive. I'm looking at them right now. One of them shows the bedroom window, the one that used to be mine. Another shows the garden, the exact angle from Mrs. Peterson's yard." "Jesus. When were these taken?" "The dates go back to 2015. The most recent one is from last week." He exhaled slowly. "I'm going to call the police. Don't touch anything else. Those might be evidence." The police came to my apartment that evening. 2 officers, both looking skeptical until I showed them the photographs. They went through each one, documenting the dates, taking pictures of the pictures with their phones. They asked about the auction, about the website, about how I'd paid. I gave them everything. I had screenshots of the listing, the transaction history, the message about delivery. They took the photographs and the box as evidence and said they'd investigate. One officer, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, told me to call if anything else unusual happened. "Be careful," she said at my door. "I don't know what this is, but someone went to a lot of trouble to document your parents' house. That's not normal." Over the next few weeks, the police investigation went nowhere. The auction website was untraceable, hosted on servers bouncing through multiple countries. The cryptocurrency transaction couldn't be followed beyond a certain point. There was no return address on the box, no fingerprints except mine, no DNA, nothing. The person who'd listed the items had covered their tracks completely. The estate sale in Kenora turned out to be real. There had been a man who died there, and his belongings were being sold off. But when the police contacted the estate executor, they said they'd never heard of any online auction. All the estate sales had been conducted through a local auction house. Someone had been running a fake auction using real estate sale information as cover. My parents installed security cameras around their house. Front door, back door, driveway, all the angles that had appeared in those photographs. My dad started keeping the porch light on all night. My mom stopped gardening in the backyard, said she didn't feel safe out there anymore. I kept checking that auction site, logging in compulsively to see if anything else appeared. But the listing for the Kenora estate had been removed, and the account that had posted it no longer existed. It was like the whole thing had been created specifically for me, had existed just long enough for me to find it and bid, and then had disappeared. That should have been the end of it. But about 3 months later, I received another package. Same plain cardboard box, same handwriting on the address label. I almost didn't open it. I called the police first, and they sent someone over to photograph it before I cut the tape. Inside were more photographs, but these weren't of my parents' house. They were of my apartment building, taken from across the street, from the parking lot, from the sidewalk outside, different times of day, different weather conditions. And mixed in with them were photographs taken from inside the building, the lobby, the hallway on my floor, the stairwell. The most recent one showed my apartment door. Just the door, the number clearly visible, the welcome mat I'd put out 2 weeks earlier. On the back of each photograph was a date and time, just like before. The oldest was from a month ago. The most recent was from yesterday. The police took the new photographs. added them to the investigation file that was going nowhere. They increased patrols around my building, but there wasn't much else they could do. No crime had been committed, except maybe stalking, and even that was hard to prove without knowing who was doing it. I started seeing the photographer everywhere. Every stranger on the street was suspect. Every car parked too long in my neighborhood made me paranoid. I'd look out my window and scan the buildings across the street, looking for anyone with a camera. I stopped going to my parents' house, terrified I might lead whoever this was directly to them. Marcus felt guilty for introducing me to the auction site. He tried to help, used his technical skills to dig deeper into the website's architecture, but he found nothing. Whoever had set this up knew what they were doing. I thought about moving, but where would I go? And what's to say they wouldn't find me again? They'd found me once already, somehow connected me to my parents' house, tracked me to my current address. Moving felt like running from something I couldn't outrun. The worst part is not knowing why. Why photograph my parents' house for years? Why arrange for me to buy those photographs? Why send me more? What's the point of all this? Is it a threat? A warning? Some sick game? I still live in the same apartment. Still check the mail with dread every day. Still scan the streets for photographers. My parents still have their cameras running, capturing footage they review obsessively, looking for anyone suspicious. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about all those photographs, about someone standing across the street from my childhood home, camera raised, carefully documenting every angle, about them standing outside my apartment building, taking the same meticulous pictures, about the hours and days and years they must have spent watching. I think about the fact that I still don't know who they are or what they want. I think about how many more photographs they might have, photographs they haven't sent me yet, photographs of places I go, people I know, moments I thought were private. And I think about the sealed box I bid on, the randomness of finding that auction listing, the coincidence of it all. Except I don't believe in coincidences anymore. I think whoever is doing this wanted me to find those photographs, wanted me to know I'm being watched, wanted me to understand that they've been there all along, in the background of my life, documenting everything. The question is why, and I'm terrified I'll eventually find out. I was in my third year at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, taking a folklore and mythology course that required a research project on local urban legends. I'd chosen to focus on the city's abandoned industrial sites, particularly the old grain elevators near the port. Thunder Bay had been a major shipping hub for decades, and the waterfront was littered with massive concrete structures that had been left to decay when the shipping industry contracted. They were perfect subjects for urban legends, huge, imposing, empty buildings that loomed over the city like the ruins of some dead civilization. I'd been doing standard research at first, checking local history archives, interviewing longtime residents, reading old newspaper articles. But I wanted something more current, something that showed how legends evolved in the digital age. That's how I ended up on the dark web. I wasn't doing anything illegal, just exploring forums and chat rooms where people discussed paranormal topics and urban exploration. Most of it was garbage people making up stories for attention, sharing obviously photoshopped images, rehashing the same tired creepypasta narratives. But I thought I might find something interesting, some modern folklore that was being created in real time. I found the chat room on a Tuesday night in late October. It was called Thunder Bay Sightings, and the description said it was for documenting unexplained phenomena in the city. There were maybe a dozen active users, most of them posting the kind of stuff I'd expected, vague stories about seeing lights in the sky, hearing strange sounds near the lake, feeling watched in abandoned buildings. Standard urban legend material. But one user stood out. Their handle was just a string of numbers, 87623, and they'd been posting for months, according to the timestamps. Unlike the others, their posts were detailed and specific. Dates, times, exact locations, weather conditions. They claimed something was living in the abandoned grain elevators, specifically the massive concrete structure known as Pool 6, and they'd been documenting it since July. Their posts read like field notes. October 8, 2:34 a.m. Movement observed on the upper catwalk. Subject approximately 7 to 8 feet tall, moving horizontally along the structure. Ambient temperature negativo, 2 grado Celsius. No other individuals in the area. They included photos too. Grainy, taken at night with what looked like a telephoto lens, showing the grain elevators from various angles. Most were just images of empty concrete and rusted metal, but occasionally there would be something in the frame, a dark shape in a window, a figure on a catwalk too distant to make out clearly, shadows that seemed wrong somehow. I thought it was elaborate fiction at first. Someone with too much time on their hands, creating a complex narrative for an audience of urban legend enthusiasts. The photos could have been staged, the detailed observations could have been invented, but there was something compelling about the consistency of it, the mundane details that made it feel real. Then they posted a video. It was surveillance footage, according to the file name, though they didn't say how they'd obtained it. The timestamp showed it was from 3 nights earlier, 3:17 a.m. The camera was positioned high up, looking down on one of the walkways that connected the grain elevator structures. The footage was black and white, poor quality, but clear enough to see the scene. For the first 30 seconds, nothing happened. Just an empty walkway, dimly lit by the ambient light from the city. Then something moved into frame from the right side. It was tall, too tall. It had to duck slightly to fit under the overhead beams, and when it straightened up, its head came close to an 8-foot clearance. The figure was dark, either wearing dark clothing or naturally dark-skinned. Hard to tell in the low-quality footage. But what made my skin crawl was the way it moved. It didn't walk so much as glide. Its movements too fluid, too smooth. Human beings have a certain rhythm when they walk, a natural bob and sway. This thing moved like it was on rails, perfectly level, perfectly steady. It crossed the walkway in maybe 5 seconds and disappeared out of frame on the left side. I watched it 3 times, trying to find evidence of editing or special effects. I couldn't see any. It looked real. User 87623 had posted a comment with the video. Subject shows increasing boldness, previously only observed at ground level or in interior spaces. This is first documentation of subject on exposed walkway. I spent the next 2 days reading through their entire post history. They claim to have first observed the subject in late July, just glimpses at first, a shape moving in a window, a shadow that didn't match any structural element. Over the months, the sightings had become more frequent and more detailed. They'd never gotten close to it, always observing from a distance with cameras and binoculars. They claimed to have hours of footage and hundreds of photographs. What struck me was their tone. They weren't trying to convince anyone or generate fear. They wrote like a researcher documenting an animal, clinical and precise. No speculation about what it might be, no dramatic language, just observations and data. For my project, this was gold. Whether it was real or an elaborate hoax, it was a perfect example of how urban legends were being created and disseminated in the digital age. I decided to visit the grain elevators myself, take some photos, maybe even try to recreate some of the angles from 87623's images. I went on a Thursday afternoon when the light was good for photography. The port area was mostly deserted, a few trucks moving in and out of the active terminals, but the old grain elevator district was abandoned. Pool 6 loomed over everything, a massive concrete tower, maybe 200 feet tall, with connecting buildings and walkways, spreading out like the legs of some giant insect. There were no trespassing signs everywhere, but the fences had been cut in several places, and I found an opening easily enough. I spent about 2 hours walking around the exterior, taking photos from different angles, trying to capture the sense of scale and decay. The place was eerie in daylight. I couldn't imagine being there at night. I was standing in the shadow of the main tower, adjusting my camera settings, when I felt it. That prickling sensation on the back of your neck, the primitive warning system that tells you you're being watched. I turned and scanned the structure above me, looking at the windows and walkways. I didn't see anything, but the feeling didn't go away. I finished up quickly after that and drove home. I'd gotten what I needed for my project. That night, I checked the chat room again. User 87623 had posted something new. It was a photograph, taken from inside one of the grain elevator structures. The angle was looking out through a broken window toward the area where I'd been standing that afternoon. The image showed the concrete apron, some rusted machinery, and in the background, barely visible but definitely there, was my car. I recognized it immediately. The dent in the bumper from where I'd backed into a pole last year. The Lakehead University parking sticker in the rear window. The photo was timestamped 3:42 p.m., exactly when I'd been there. My hands started shaking. This wasn't fiction. This wasn't some elaborate hoax. Someone had been in that building while I was outside. Someone had photographed my car. Someone knew I'd been there. I immediately closed the browser and deleted my browsing history. I cleared my cache, wiped my cookies, did everything I could think of to remove any trace of my visit to that chat room. I sat there in my apartment, my heart pounding, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't go to the police. What would I tell them? That someone on the dark web had posted a photo of my car? That I'd been trespassing in a restricted area? They'd probably charge me rather than help me. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Maybe 87623 had been there that afternoon too, documenting their subject, and had happened to photograph the area where my car was parked. Maybe they hadn't even noticed the car specifically. But I knew better. The way the photo was framed, the angle, it was deliberate. They'd wanted me to see it, wanted me to know they'd seen me. The next morning, I had a private message waiting in my chat room inbox. It was from 87623. The message was short. I saw you taking pictures. Be careful, it saw you too. I stared at those words for a long time. My first instinct was to reply, to ask what they meant, to demand answers. But something stopped me. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message and then deleted my account. I wiped my entire browser history again and installed new security software. I tried to find 87623's account using a different login, but they disappeared. The account was gone, their post deleted or removed. It was like they'd never existed. I told myself I was being paranoid. I threw myself into finishing my research project, using publicly available information and avoiding any mention of the chat room or 87,623. I turned it in 2 weeks later and tried to forget about the whole thing. But I couldn't shake that feeling from the elevator complex, that sense of being watched. And I couldn't stop thinking about that message. It saw you too. The first text message came 3 weeks later. Unknown number, no words, just an image. It was a photo of the grain elevators at night, taken from ground level, looking up at the concrete tower. The image was dark, poorly lit, but clear enough to see the structure. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam or a wrong number. But something made me zoom in on the image, examining the details. That's when I saw it. In one of the windows, maybe 5 stories up, there was a dark shape. It could have been anything, a shadow, a piece of machinery, debris, but it was positioned in a way that made it look like it was standing there, looking out, looking down at whoever had taken the photo. I blocked the number and tried to forget about it, but the messages kept coming. Different numbers each time, always unknown, always the same format, just a photo. Sometimes it was the grain elevators, sometimes it was other parts of the port, all taken at night, all grainy and dark. And in some of them, if you look closely, you could see it, a shape in a window, a figure on a catwalk, something standing in the shadows between buildings. Always too far away to make out clearly, always positioned in a way that suggested it was aware of the camera, aware of being photographed. I stopped going to the port. I stopped researching urban legends. I changed my number twice, but the messages always found me somehow. The last one came 2 nights ago. Same format, unknown number, no text, just an image. This time it showed the street outside my apartment building, taken from across the road, looking up at my window. The photo was recent. I could see my curtains, the ones I'd just put up last week. And in the foreground, partially hidden by a parked car but clearly visible if you look closely, was a dark shape, tall, too tall, standing in a way that suggested it was watching my window. I haven't slept since then. I keep the curtains closed and the lights off. I check every shadow, every sound, and I think about that message from 87623, those words that I didn't understand at the time but that make terrible sense now. It saw you too. Whatever is in those grain elevators, whatever 87623 was documenting all those months, it knows about me now. It saw me that afternoon when I thought I was alone, taking photographs for a college project that doesn't matter anymore. And I think it's been watching me ever since. My brother Marcus was always into computers in a way I never understood. He could spend hours in the basement hunched over his laptop, navigating through layers of encryption and anonymity networks, exploring corners of the internet that most people didn't know existed. He called it research, said he was interested in cybersecurity and digital privacy. My parents called it a waste of time. I just thought it was weird, but Marcus was my brother and I didn't judge. It was a Friday night in November when he called me down to the basement. I was home from university for the weekend, lying on the couch watching TV, when I heard him shouting my name from downstairs. There was something in his voice, excitement mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify, that made me get up and go see what he wanted. The basement was dim, lit only by the glow of Marcus's multiple monitors. He had his whole setup down there, a custom-built PC with more processing power than most small businesses. 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle, mechanical keyboard, the works. He'd been upgrading it piece by piece since he was 16, buying parts with money from his summer jobs, building his digital fortress. "Check this out," he said when I came down the stairs. He was leaning forward in his chair, his face illuminated by the blue-white glow of the screens. "I found something interesting on this forum. It's called the Ottawa Project." "What is it?" I asked, pulling up a folding chair beside him. "Supposed to be an ARG, alternate reality game. Some indie developers in Ottawa created it apparently. It's been circulating on the dark web for a few weeks. I just finished downloading it." I watched as he navigated through folders and extracted files from a compressed archive. A window popped up, asking if he wanted to install the program. He clicked yes. The installation took maybe 30 seconds. Then a new window opened, full screen, taking over all 3 of his monitors. The interface was simple, almost primitive, just a map of Ottawa rendered in black and white, like something from an old GPS system. But scattered across the map were red dots. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, blinking slowly in a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. "What are the dots?" I asked. "That's the interesting part," Marcus said. He clicked on one at random. It was positioned somewhere in downtown Ottawa, near the Rideau Canal. A new window opened, showing a photograph. It was a street corner at night. The photo was taken from ground level, showing a intersection with old brick buildings on either side. The streetlights cast harsh orange pools on the wet pavement. There were no people, no cars, nothing moving. Just an empty street corner captured in the dead of night. At the top of the photo was a timestamp, October 23, 2:17 a.m. "They're all like this," Marcus said, clicking back to the map and selecting another dot. Another photo, another empty street at night, a different location, but the same eerie quality, deserted, still, like the city had been evacuated. We clicked through maybe a dozen more, all photos of Ottawa, all taken at night, all showing empty streets, abandoned buildings, dark alleyways. The timestamps varied, going back several months, but they were all late at night, always between midnight and 4 in the morning. "Okay, this is creepy," I said, "but what's the game part? What are you supposed to do?" "I don't know yet," Marcus admitted. "The forum post didn't really explain it, just said it was an experimental project and people should download it and explore. I guess you're supposed to figure out the rules yourself." He zoomed out on the map, looking at the distribution of the dots. They were scattered all over Ottawa, concentrated in the downtown core, but extending out into the suburbs. As I watched, a new dot appeared near the edge of the map, blinking to life with a soft chime from the speakers. "Did you see that?" Marcus said. "They're updating in real time." He clicked on the new dot. The timestamp said November 13 today, 11:47 p.m., 90 minutes ago. The photo showed an industrial area, warehouses and chain-link fences, shot from inside a parked car. You could see part of the dashboard at the bottom of the frame, the edge of a steering wheel. "Someone's out there right now," Marcus said quietly, taking these photos and uploading them to the program. I felt a chill run down my spine. This didn't feel like a game anymore. It felt like surveillance. Marcus kept clicking through the dots, methodically checking each one, trying to understand the pattern. Most of them were older, days or weeks in the past, but occasionally we'd find a recent one, from earlier tonight or last night. The photos were always the same: empty streets, abandoned places, the city in its most desolate moments. Then Marcus clicked on a dot that appeared near the center of the map, in a residential area called Vanier. The timestamp said November 13, 11:32 p.m., half an hour ago. The photo loaded, and we both froze. It showed our street, our house, taken from across the road, maybe 50 feet away. The angle was slightly elevated, like the photographer had been standing on the curb or on a small rise. You could see our house clearly in the frame, the front porch, the living room window with the curtains partially open, the blue glow of the TV visible inside. My parents were in that room, They'd been watching a movie when I came downstairs. I could see them now if I went back up sitting on the couch, probably asleep by this point. And 30 minutes ago, someone had been standing across the street photographing our house. "What the fuck?" Marcus whispered. His face had gone pale, his hand frozen on the mouse. I stood up and moved to the basement window, looking out at the street. It was dark and quiet, a few parked cars, streetlights casting yellow pools. No one standing around, no one watching, but they'd been there, recently. "Close it," I said. "Close the program." Marcus tried to click the X in the corner of the window. Nothing happened. He tried Alt, F4, nothing. He opened the task manager to force quit the application. The program wasn't listed. "It's not showing up," he said, his voice rising slightly. "I can't close it." As we watched, new dots started appearing on the map, not one at a time like before, but in clusters. 5, 10, 20 new dots, all concentrated in our neighborhood, all blinking their slow, steady rhythm. Marcus clicked on one. The timestamp said 11:54 p.m., 4 minutes ago. The photo showed a house 3 doors down from ours, the same elevated angle, the same surveillance quality. He clicked another. 11:51 p.m., the house next door. I could see Mrs. Patterson's garden gnomes in the frame, her car in the driveway. Another. 11:49 p.m., the corner store 2 blocks away, closed and dark. "They're all around us," I said. "Whoever's doing this, they're in our neighborhood right now." More dots appeared. The map was filling up with them, concentrated in a circle maybe half a mile in diameter with our house somewhere near the center. Each one had a timestamp from the past hour. Each one showed a location nearby. Marcus was breathing hard now, clicking frantically through the dots, watching as our neighborhood was documented and cataloged by some unseen observer or observers. There were too many photos from too many different locations. It had to be more than one person. "We need to call the police," I said. "And tell them what? That we downloaded something from the dark web and now there are photos of our house? They'll think we're paranoid or that we're involved in something illegal." He had a point, but we had to do something. More dots appeared. These were time-stamped from the current minute, real-time updates. I looked at the basement window again, suddenly aware of how visible we were from the outside, sitting in the glow of those monitors. "Turn off the lights," I said. "Close the curtains." Marcus didn't argue. He reached up and pulled the cord, dropping the blind over the basement window. I hit the light switch, plunging us into darkness except for the glow of the monitors. On the screen, more dots continued to appear, clustered around our house now, tightening. Some of them were so close they had to be from our yard, our driveway. "Marcus, shut down the computer," I said. "Pull the plug. Do it now." He hesitated for just a second, then reached down and yanked the power cord from the wall. The monitors went black. The fan spun down. The basement was suddenly silent and dark. We sat there in the darkness, listening. I could hear my brother breathing beside me, could hear my own heart pounding. Upstairs, I heard the TV go silent. My parents were going to bed. "What the hell was that?" Marcus whispered. "I don't know, but we're not turning that computer back on tonight." We waited in the dark basement for maybe 20 minutes, not speaking, just listening for any sound from outside. Eventually, my parents went to bed, and the house settled into its usual nighttime creaks and groans. Nothing seemed out of place. No one knocked on the door. No one looked through the windows. Finally, we crept upstairs and went to our rooms. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept getting up and looking out my window, checking the street, looking for anyone standing there with a camera. The next morning, Marcus booted up his computer in safe mode. The Ottawa project was gone, completely wiped. He checked every folder, every recent file list, every hidden directory. There was no trace of the program anywhere. Even the original download file was gone from his downloads folder. "It deleted itself," he said, "or someone deleted it remotely." "Good," I said. "Leave it that way." We tried to forget about it. Marcus stayed off the dark web forums for a while. We didn't talk about what we'd seen. I went back to university the following week and tried to put it out of my mind. Then, 3 days later, Marcus called me. "There's something in the mailbox," he said. His voice was tight. "What do you mean?" "A USB drive. Just sitting there. No note, no envelope. Just a USB drive in a plastic bag." I felt that chill again, spreading from the base of my skull down my spine. "Don't plug it in," I said immediately. I wasn't planning to. But what do I do with it? Get rid of it. Destroy it. Don't even touch it. I heard rustling on his end of the line. I'm taking it to the backyard right now. I stayed on the phone with him while he burned it. He used lighter fluid and a match, melting the plastic and circuitry into a black, twisted lump. We both felt better once it was destroyed, though neither of us could have said what we thought might have been on it. We never found out what the Ottawa project really was. A game? Surveillance software? Some kind of social experiment? I've looked for it online since then, searched every dark web forum I could access, and found nothing. No mentions, no downloads, no discussions. It's like it never existed. But I know it did. I saw those photos. I saw our house on that screen, captured by someone standing in the darkness across the street. And sometimes, late at night, I think about all those red dots appearing on the map, circling closer and closer. I think about what might have been on that USB drive, what message or malware or worse might have been contained in those circuits. And I think about the fact that whoever was behind it knew where we lived, knew we downloaded their program, knew enough to leave that drive in our mailbox. Marcus doesn't do dark web exploration anymore. He says he lost interest, that he's focused on other things now. But I think the truth is simpler and more frightening. He's afraid of what else might be watching, waiting, cataloging, building its map of red dots, one photo at a time, in the dark hours when the city sleeps. I'd been saving for months to upgrade my camera equipment when I found the listing. I was browsing a dark web marketplace that specialized in vintage electronics and collectibles, looking for deals on high-end photography gear. Most of the listings were overpriced or obviously fake, but one caught my eye, a Leica M6, the classic 35mm rangefinder that normally sold for $3,000 or $4,000. This one was listed at $800. The photos in the listing showed a camera in pristine condition, black chrome body, no visible scratches or dents, the leather grip intact and supple. The seller's description was brief but professional. Vintage Leica M6, mint condition, fully functional, minor cosmetic wear. Comes with original case and strap, selling due to downsizing collection. Located in Sudbury, Ontario. Cash only, in-person transaction preferred. What sold me was the seller's reputation. They had dozens of positive reviews, all from buyers who'd purchased vintage cameras and lenses. The feedback was consistent: fast shipping, items as described, excellent packaging. This wasn't some scammer looking to make a quick buck. This was a serious collector selling off pieces of their collection. I sent them a message through the marketplace's encrypted system. Interested in the Leica M6. I'm in Toronto but can drive to Sudbury. Would you be willing to meet somewhere public so I can inspect the camera before purchase? They responded within an hour. Public meeting acceptable. I'll be at the Second Cup on Durham Street this Saturday at 2 p.m. I'll bring the camera. Cash only, please. I did my due diligence before making the drive. I researched Leica M6 pricing, studied photos so I'd know what to look for, read articles about common issues and how to spot fakes. By Saturday morning, I felt confident I could tell if the camera was legitimate. The drive to Sudbury took about 4 hours. I arrived early and waited in the coffee shop, a generic chain location in a strip mall. The place was moderately busy, people working on laptops, a few families with kids, the usual weekend coffee shop crowd. I ordered a latte and sat at a table near the window where I could see people coming and going. She arrived exactly at 2. I recognized her from her profile photo on the marketplace, though the image had been grainy and I hadn't been able to make out much detail. She was maybe 50, 55, with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and glasses with thin metal frames. She wore a dark coat and carried a leather camera bag over her shoulder. Nothing about her stood out. She looked like someone's aunt or a retired school teacher. "Are you David?" she asked, approaching my table. "That's me. You must be Helen." She nodded and sat down, placing the camera bag on the table between us. "I hope you didn't wait long. Traffic was heavier than I expected." "No problem. I got here early." She unzipped the bag and carefully extracted the camera, handling it with the practiced ease of someone who'd owned a lot of photographic equipment. She set it on the table in front of me. I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. The weight felt right, solid and substantial. The rangefinder mechanism operated smoothly. The film advance lever clicked through its cycle with the satisfying mechanical precision that Leicas were famous for. I checked the serial number and looked it up on my phone. It matched the production year and model. Everything about it seemed legitimate. "Have you owned it long?" I asked. About 10 years. It was my late husband's. He was a photographer. I'm selling off his collection. I'm sorry for your loss. She gave a small, sad smile. Thank you. He would have wanted his equipment to go to someone who'd actually use it. I continued my inspection, checking the lens mount, the viewfinder, the light meter. Does the light meter work? It does. I put a fresh battery in last week to test it. I raised the camera to my eye and pointed it at the window, checking the viewfinder. The rangefinder patch was clear and bright, the frame lines crisp. There's still film in it, I noticed. Seeing the exposure counter showed 27 frames. Oh, I forgot about that. You can keep it, or I can remove it if you'd prefer. I'll keep it. Maybe there's something interesting on there. I spent another 10 minutes examining the camera from every angle. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. This was the real deal, and at $800, it was an absolute steal. I'll take it, I said. She nodded, as if she'd expected this. I pulled out $800 in cash. I'd stopped at an ATM on the way and counted it out on the table. She counted it again, folded it neatly, and put it in her purse. We made small talk for a few more minutes, mostly about photography and her husband's work. She was polite but reserved, not offering much personal information. Eventually, she stood up, said goodbye, and left. I watched her walk to an older sedan in the parking lot, get in, and drive away. Then I packed up the camera, finished my coffee, and started the drive back to Toronto. I was excited the whole drive home. I'd just bought a camera I'd wanted for years at a price I couldn't believe. I kept glancing at the camera bag on the passenger seat, already planning what I'd shoot with it, which lenses I'd save up for next. When I got home, I decided to develop the film that was in the camera. I had a basic darkroom setup in my bathroom, nothing fancy, but enough to develop black and white film. I figured if there were photos of Helen's husband's work on there, it might be interesting to see. I worked in total darkness, feeling my way through the familiar process of extracting the film from the canister, loading it onto the developing reel, mixing the chemistry. The whole process took maybe 90 minutes from start to finish. When I finally hung the negatives up to dry and turned on the light, I expected to see landscapes or portraits or whatever Helen's husband had been photographing before he died. What I saw made my blood run cold. The negatives showed photos of me. I counted them, my hands shaking. 27 exposures, just like the counter had indicated, all of me. The first few showed me leaving my apartment building. Different days, different clothes, but the same angle shot from across the street, telephoto lens compressing the perspective. I could see my face clearly in each frame, could see what I'd been wearing, could see the coffee cup in my hand or the bag over my shoulder. More photos showed me walking to my car, getting in, driving away, different times of day, different days of the week. The dates on the edge of the negatives confirmed it. These had been taken over the course of 3 weeks. There were photos of me at the grocery store, at the gym, sitting on my balcony reading a book. Whoever had taken these had been following me, documenting my movements, my routines, my life, and then I got to the last few exposures. They showed me in the coffee shop in Sudbury, sitting at that table by the window waiting for Helen. The angle was from outside, shot through the window. I could see myself checking my phone, drinking my latte, looking at my watch. These photos had been taken before she arrived. While I was waiting for her, she'd been outside photographing me. I dropped the negatives and backed away from them, my heart hammering. This didn't make sense. Why would she have photos of me from before we'd even met? How long had she been planning this? I grabbed my phone and pulled up the marketplace website, navigating to her seller profile. The page wouldn't load. I tried the direct URL. Error 404. Profile not found. I checked my message history with her. The entire conversation was gone. Not deleted, just gone, like it had never existed. I tried searching for her listing. Nothing. No trace of it anywhere on the marketplace. I sat down on my bathroom floor, surrounded by wet negatives and the chemical smell of developer, trying to make sense of what was happening. A stranger had been following me for weeks, photographing me without my knowledge. She'd created an elaborate fiction about being a collector selling her dead husband's camera. She'd driven to Sudbury and met me in person, handed me this camera with these photos already on it, taken my money, and disappeared. But why? What was the point? I called the police. I explained everything, the dark web marketplace, the meeting in Sudbury, the photos. The officer who took my report was skeptical but professional. He said they'd look into it, asked me to email him copies of the negatives. They never found her. They contacted the Sudbury police, who checked the coffee shop's security footage. Helen was there, clear as day, sitting with me, handing me the camera. But when they tried to trace her car, the license plate came back as belonging to a vehicle that had been scrapped 2 years earlier. They found no one named Helen matching her description in Sudbury or the surrounding area. The marketplace profile was gone, wiped from the servers. Even the administrator of the site couldn't find any record of it. I sold the camera a week later, couldn't stand having it in my apartment, couldn't stand looking at it and thinking about those photos. I got less than I'd paid for it, I just wanted it gone, but I kept the negatives. I told myself it was for evidence, in case the police investigation went somewhere. But that was a lie. The real reason was darker, harder to admit. I kept them because I needed proof that it had really happened, that I hadn't imagined it, that somewhere out there was a woman who'd spent weeks following me, photographing me, documenting my life in obsessive detail, and then she'd packaged it all up and sold it back to me. Sometimes I take out those negatives and look at them under a loupe, studying the details. In some of the photos, I can see reflections in windows or car mirrors. Sometimes I think I can see her there, just barely visible, the person behind the camera. I've moved since then, changed my routines, altered my patterns. I'm more aware now of people around me, of cars parked too long on my street, of anyone who seems to be in too many of the same places I am. But I can't shake the feeling that it didn't stop, that somewhere out there, Helen, if that's even her real name, is still taking pictures, that she's following someone else now, building another collection, creating another elaborate scenario to deliver her work to her subject. Or maybe she's still following me. Maybe the photos didn't stop with those 27 exposures. Maybe she's out there right now with a new camera, a new angle, documenting everything I do. Sometimes I check the dark web marketplaces, looking for her profile, looking for anything that might be connected to her. I've never found anything, but I keep looking because I need to know why. Why me? Why those photos? Why that elaborate performance in Sudbury? I've thought about it obsessively, turned it over in my mind 1,000 times. Was it art? Some kind of commentary on surveillance and privacy? Or was it something darker, more personal, more inexplicable? I don't have answers. All I have are those negatives, locked in a drawer in my desk. 27 photos of my own life, taken by a stranger, sold back to me in a camera I'd wanted for years. And sometimes, late at night, I imagine her out there in the darkness with her camera, watching someone's lit window, waiting for them to step into frame, raising the viewfinder to her eye and pressing the shutter. Click. I'd been into urban exploration photography for about 3 years when I found the forum. It was linked from a dark web directory, described as a community for people interested in abandoned locations across Ontario. The forum required registration but was otherwise unrestricted, and I figured it might be a good resource for finding new places to photograph. Most of the content was exactly what I'd expected. People posting photos of abandoned factories, discussing the history of closed hospitals and defunct railways, coordinating meetups for group explorations. There was a section for each major city in Ontario, threads organized by location and type of structure. It was all pretty tame, enthusiasts sharing their hobby. I browsed for a few weeks, mostly reading and learning. The Windsor section was particularly active, which made sense given the city's industrial history and its proximity to Detroit. Lots of old automotive factories, abandoned border infrastructure, remnants from when Windsor had been a major manufacturing hub. Then I saw the thread, the Windsor tunnels. The original post was from a user named BorderCrosser87, and it had been posted 2 months earlier. The text was brief. Found something interesting. Prohibition, era smuggling tunnels, still accessible. Going to explore next week. We'll post photos. That initial post had generated a lot of interest. Other users chimed in with historical information. Windsor had indeed been a major smuggling center during Prohibition, with liquor being transported from Canada to Detroit through various means, including tunnels under the Detroit River. Most of those tunnels had supposedly been sealed or destroyed decades ago, but there were persistent rumors that some remained. BorderCrosser87 had posted a follow-up a week later. Found the entrance, coordinates attached. Place is massive. More than just tunnels, there are rooms, chambers, like it was a whole underground complex. Going deeper tomorrow. The coordinates were included in the post, along with a warning about proper safety equipment and the dangers of underground exploration. A few photos accompanied the post: dark tunnels with brick walls, wooden support beams that looked ancient, narrow passageways disappearing into darkness. That was the last post from Bordercrosser 87. Several users had replied asking for updates, wanting to know what else they'd found. But there were no responses. The account had gone silent. I saved the coordinates to my phone. Windsor was only a 4-hour drive from Toronto, easily doable in a weekend. The idea of photographing a genuine Prohibition-era smuggling tunnel was exciting. It would be a unique addition to my portfolio. A few days later, I got a private message. The username was a random string of letters and numbers, HT7F9D2K, and the account had been created that same day. The message was short: "Don't go to the tunnels, please. I went 3 months ago. I got out, but something followed me." I stared at the message for a long time. My first thought was that it was Bordercrosser 87 using a new account, trying to warn people away for some reason. Maybe they'd gotten hurt down there, or maybe they'd realized how dangerous it was and felt guilty about posting the coordinates. I typed a reply. "What do you mean something followed you? Are you Bordercrosser 87? The message sat unread for days. The account never logged in again. I tried to forget about it, told myself it was just someone messing around, trying to create mystery. But I couldn't quite shake the uneasy feeling it had given me. Then I got another message. Different username K9M2P1S, 8 different account, but the same basic message. "Don't go, stay away. It's not worth it." This time I checked the account immediately. Created that day. No other posts, no other activity. I replied again. "Who are you? What are you talking about?" No response. Over the next week, I received 5 more messages, all from different accounts, all newly created, all with the same warning variations. "Don't go to the tunnels. It's dangerous. Something's down there. If you go, you won't come back the same." I started to get paranoid. I checked the original thread, wanting to see if anyone else was getting these messages, if there was some explanation. The thread was gone, not just deleted, completely scrubbed from the forum. When I tried to access it through my browser history, I got an error message. "Thread does not exist." I searched the entire Windsor section for any mention of the tunnels. Nothing. I searched the whole forum. No results. I went to Bordercrosser 87's profile page. The account had been deleted. All their posts were gone, all their activity wiped clean. It was like they'd never existed. I checked my saved coordinates on my phone. They were still there, a location in an industrial area of Windsor near the riverfront. The coordinates were real. The thread had been real. I had screenshots to prove it. I'd saved a few of the tunnel photos Bordercrosser 87 had posted. But now multiple someones, using throwaway accounts, was desperately trying to warn me away. I should have listened, should have deleted the coordinates and moved on. But I was stubborn, and part of me was convinced this was all some elaborate ARG or prank. Urban explorer communities sometimes did this kind of thing, creating fictional mysteries to add excitement to their hobby. I decided I wouldn't go alone. I reached out to a friend, Marcus, who sometimes joined me on exploration trips. I told him about the tunnels but left out the weird messages. I just said I'd found coordinates for an interesting location in Windsor. "Sounds cool," he said. "When do you want to go?" We planned for the following Saturday, but the messages didn't stop. Every day, I'd wake up to new private messages. The usernames were always different, always random strings of characters. The messages were always warnings. Some were simple, "Don't go." Others were more detailed, "I made it out but I'm not the same. Please don't make the same mistake." One message just said, "It's waiting." I started checking the accounts sending these messages. Every single one was created on the day the message was sent. Every single one had 0 activity, except for that one message to me. And every time I tried to reply, the account would be deleted before my response could be sent. On Thursday, 2 days before Marcus and I were supposed to drive to Windsor, I got a message that made me seriously reconsider the whole trip. The username was XS9R4T2M. The message said, "I can see you've saved the coordinates. I can see you're planning to go this weekend. Please don't. It knows you were planning to come. It's ready for you." I felt ice run down my spine. How could they know I'd saved the coordinates? How could they know my plans? I immediately changed all my passwords. ran security scans on my devices, checked for keyloggers and malware. Nothing. My system was clean. But someone knew. Someone had access to information they shouldn't have. I went back to the forum and searched again for any mention of the Windsor tunnels. Still nothing. I looked for Border Crosser 87's posts. Still gone. It was like the entire topic had been erased from existence, except for those coordinates on my phone, and the screenshots I'd saved, and the dozens of warning messages in my inbox. Friday morning, the day before we were supposed to leave, I got a final message. If you go, document everything. Take photos, record video. You'll need proof. No one will believe you otherwise. And whatever you do, don't go into the deep section. Stay in the main tunnels. If you hear singing, run. Singing? What the hell did that mean? I tried to reply, tried to ask for more information. The account was already deleted. I called Marcus and canceled. Told him something had come up, that I couldn't make the trip this weekend. He was disappointed but understanding. We rescheduled for the following month, picking a different location, an abandoned psychiatric hospital near Hamilton that we'd both wanted to photograph. I never told him the real reason I'd canceled. I was too embarrassed, too unsure of what was even happening. How do you explain that anonymous accounts on a dark web forum had convinced you not to explore a location? It sounded paranoid. It sounded crazy. But I couldn't ignore the warnings. Too many of them. Too consistent. Too insistent. I deleted the coordinates from my phone. I deleted the screenshots. I left the forum and never went back. But the messages didn't stop. Even now, months later, I still get them occasionally. Different forums, different platforms, even my regular email account somehow. Always from throwaway accounts that disappear immediately after sending. Always variations of the same message. You made the right choice. Thank you for not going. It's still waiting. Don't change your mind. I've tried to research the Windsor tunnels through normal channels, historical records, city archives, news articles. I've found references to Prohibition-era smuggling, to tunnels that were built and later sealed. But nothing about active, accessible tunnels. Nothing that matches the coordinates I'd saved. I've tried to find Border Crosser 87 through other means, searching for their username on different platforms, looking for any trace of who they might have been. Nothing. Sometimes I wonder if I should have gone, if I should have documented whatever is down there, gathered the proof that one message mentioned. But then I think about all those warnings, all those desperate pleas from people using anonymous accounts to tell me to stay away. And I think about that last message. If you hear singing, run. What kind of singing? Who would be singing in abandoned tunnels under Windsor? And why would that be the signal to run? I don't have answers. All I have are questions and a growing certainty that I made the right decision by not going. But sometimes late at night, I pull up a map of Windsor on my phone. I look at the industrial area near the riverfront where those coordinates pointed. I try to imagine what's down there in the darkness. What Border Crosser 87 found. What followed them when they left. And I wonder about all those people who sent me warnings. How many of them went into those tunnels? How many of them made it out? And what did they bring back with them? The latest message came last week. It was longer than usual, more specific. It knows your name now. It knows you are going to come. It's patient. It can wait. Don't ever go to Windsor. Don't ever change your mind. It will be watching for you. I blocked the account immediately, but I know there will be more. There always are. And somewhere in Windsor, in the darkness beneath the city, something is waiting. Patient and hungry and aware. Aware of me. Aware of my name. Aware that I almost came to find it. I just hope it stays in those tunnels. I hope it never decides to come looking for me instead. I was working late on a Tuesday night, finishing up a project that had been consuming most of my time for weeks. It was past midnight when I finally closed my laptop and reached for my phone to check messages before bed. That's when I saw a notification from an encrypted messaging app I rarely used, mostly for work-related communications with a few colleagues who were particular about privacy. The notification showed a file transfer from an unknown number. No text message, no explanation, just a video file. The sender's profile was blank, no name, no photo, no information at all. The file was large, about 200 megabytes, suggesting it was several minutes long. I should have deleted it. I knew better than to open unsolicited files from unknown sources, especially on an encrypted platform that prided itself on anonymity. But it was late, I was tired, and curiosity got the better of me. I downloaded the file and opened it. The video was surveillance footage, black and white, grainy quality like you'd see from a security camera. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days earlier, Saturday at 2:17 a.m. The angle showed what looked like a parking garage, multiple levels visible through concrete pillars. I could see the skyline in the background, and I recognized it immediately. Hamilton, the distinctive profile of downtown Hamilton, with its mix of older buildings and newer developments, the escarpment rising behind the city. For the first minute or two, nothing happened. The camera showed empty parking levels, the occasional car passing by on the street visible through the open sides of the structure. I almost stopped watching, assuming it was going to be nothing, maybe sent to me by mistake. Then a figure appeared. They walked into frame from the left side, moving slowly through the garage. At first glance, they looked normal, wearing jeans and a dark hoodie, hands in pockets, head slightly down, just someone walking through a parking garage late at night. But something about their movement made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. They moved too smoothly, too deliberately. Human beings have a natural rhythm when they walk, a slight bounce, a sway. This person moved like they were gliding, their pace perfectly even, their posture absolutely level. It was subtle enough that you might not notice it consciously, but your brain registered that something was wrong. The figure walked through the garage, passing empty parking spots, and then stopped. They were standing in a specific spot, marked with the number 217 painted on the concrete wall. They stood there facing the camera, perfectly still. And then they raised one hand. They pointed directly at the camera lens. Their arm extended slowly, deliberately, finger pointing straight at whoever might be watching this footage. They held that position for maybe 5 seconds, then lowered their arm and walked away, disappearing out of frame the same way they'd entered. The video continued for another minute, showing nothing but empty garage levels. Then it ended. I sat there in my dark bedroom, phone in hand, trying to process what I'd just seen. The whole thing felt staged, like it was meant to be unsettling. But why send it to me? I checked the sender's information again, but there was nothing, just that blank profile. I tried to reply, typing out a simple, "Who is this?" But the message wouldn't send. I checked the app. The conversation had disappeared. The unknown number was no longer in my contacts. When I tried to access my download history to watch the video again, it was gone. The file had deleted itself. I ran a security scan on my phone, checked for malware, changed my passwords. Everything seemed fine. No evidence of intrusion or compromise. Just a strange video that had appeared and then vanished, leaving me with more questions than answers. I tried to put it out of my mind. Over the next week, I threw myself into work, trying to meet deadlines and catch up on the projects that had piled up. I had a meeting scheduled in Hamilton for the following Friday, a client presentation that had been on my calendar for months. I left Toronto around 10 in the morning, giving myself plenty of time for the drive and to find parking. The meeting was in the downtown core, and I was unfamiliar with the area. My GPS directed me to a public parking garage on James Street, a multi-level concrete structure that served several office buildings. I drove up the ramps, looking for an open spot. The garage was moderately full. It was a Friday afternoon, and downtown Hamilton was busy. I circled up through the levels until I found an available space on the 3rd floor. I pulled in, turned off the engine, and grabbed my bag from the passenger seat. I opened the door and stepped out, and that's when it hit me. This was the spot. I knew it instantly, viscerally. The angle of the concrete pillars, the view of the skyline through the open wall, the number painted on the column, 217. This was the exact location from the video. I stood there, frozen, my hands still on the car door. I looked around slowly, taking in the details. Same level, same view, same spot where that figure had stood and pointed at the camera. I looked up. There was a security camera mounted on the ceiling about 20 feet away, pointing directly at parking spot 217, pointing at me. My heart was pounding. This couldn't be a coincidence. Someone had sent me footage from this exact location, from this exact spot, and now here I was, standing in it. I got back in my car immediately, locked the doors, and started the engine. I didn't even bother with the parking ticket. I just drove down the ramps and out of the garage, not caring about the fee. I found another parking garage 3 blocks away and parked there instead, taking several deep breaths before I could calm down enough to walk to my meeting. The presentation went fine, though I was distracted and kept checking my phone. No new messages, no strange files, nothing out of the ordinary. I drove back to Toronto that evening, taking the QEW highway instead of the back roads, wanting to be on well-traveled routes with lots of other cars around. I kept checking my rearview mirror, looking for anyone who might be following me, but the traffic was normal and no one seemed to be paying attention to me. When I got home, I checked my phone one more time before bed. There was a new message. Same encrypted app. Same blank profile. Another video file. My hands were shaking as I downloaded it. I knew what it was going to show before I even opened it. The footage was from today, from that parking garage in Hamilton. The timestamp showed 1:47 p.m., about 2 hours before my meeting, right around the time I'd been standing there. The video showed me pulling into spot 217, showed me getting out of my car, showed me standing there, looking around, and then looking up at the camera. The video captured the exact moment when I'd realized where I was, the moment when the recognition and fear had crossed my face. The footage continued, showing me getting back in my car and driving away quickly. Then it cut to a different angle, the garage entrance. It showed my car leaving, showed me driving away down James Street. The video ended. This time when I tried to reply, the message went through. "Who are you? What do you want?" The response came immediately. "You stood in the right place. You looked at the camera. Now we're connected." What does that mean? You'll understand soon. Check your download folder. I checked. There were files there I hadn't downloaded. Dozens of them, all video files, all with timestamps from the past 3 days. I opened one at random. It showed my apartment building, filmed from across the street. The angle showed my living room window, the lights on, me visible inside. I opened another. My car, parked outside my gym. The timestamp was from yesterday morning. Another. Me walking into the grocery store near my apartment. They'd been following me, filming me, for days, maybe longer. I tried to respond, tried to demand answers, but the profile had disappeared again. The conversation vanished. But the video files remained in my download folder, dozens of them, a chronicle of my movements over the past week. I reported it to the police the next day, showed them the videos, explained what had happened. They were concerned, but said without knowing who was sending the files or where they were being filmed from, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested I vary my routines, be aware of my surroundings, maybe install security cameras of my own. I did all of that. I changed my routes to work, shopped at different stores, went to a different gym. I installed a camera doorbell and motion-activated lights around my apartment. I stopped using that encrypted messaging app entirely, deleted it from my phone. But the videos kept coming. They'd appear in my email now. Different email accounts, always newly created, always deleted immediately after sending. Each one showing me going about my daily life, walking to my car, entering my building, sitting in a coffee shop. And they were always from cameras I hadn't noticed. Security cameras on buildings, traffic cameras, even what looked like smartphone footage taken by someone standing nearby. The messages that came with them were always brief. Still watching. You can't hide. We're always here. I moved apartments, changed my phone number, bought a new car. Nothing helped. Because they were right. There are cameras everywhere now. Security systems, traffic monitoring, smartphones, doorbell cameras. Everywhere you go, you're being recorded. And if someone has access to those feeds, if someone knows where to look, they can track you anywhere. I still get the videos. Not every day, but often enough. Reminders that someone is out there, watching, documenting my movements. I don't know who they are or what they want. I don't know how they got my information in the first place or why they chose me. All I know is that ever since I stood in parking spot 217 inches, that Hamilton garage, ever since I looked up at that camera, I've been connected to something. Some network of surveillance, some system of observation that I can't escape. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder about that figure in the original video. The one who walked through the garage moving too smoothly, who stood in that spot and pointed at the camera. Were they a victim too? Someone who'd been drawn into this system, who'd been tracked and filmed and documented until they became part of it? Or were they showing me what I'd become? A figure on a screen, moving through the world, always aware of the cameras, always performing for an audience I can't see but know is there. Watching, recording, waiting to see what I'll do next. I'd always been fascinated by mysteries and unexplained phenomena, the kind of stuff that occupies the weird corners of the internet, where people share stories and theories about places that don't quite add up. I wasn't a believer in the supernatural exactly, but I enjoyed the hunt, the research, the possibility that there might be something out there we couldn't fully explain. That's how I found the mapping project. It was linked from a dark web forum dedicated to anomalous locations, a crowdsourced database where people could submit coordinates for places they claimed had strange histories or unexplained phenomena. Most of the submissions were obvious hoaxes or tourist traps, supposed haunted houses, places where UFOs had allegedly been spotted, that sort of thing. But I liked browsing through them, reading the descriptions, imagining what might be real. The entry that caught my attention was simple. Someone had posted coordinates for a location near Barrie, Ontario, about an hour north of Toronto. There was no description, no explanation, no photos. Just the coordinates and a single word: listen. That was it. Listen. I saved the coordinates to my phone. It was early October, a Thursday afternoon, and I had the day off work. The weather was cool but clear, perfect for a drive into the countryside. I told myself I'd just go check it out, see what was there, probably find nothing and drive home. A brief adventure to break up the week. The drive took me north on Highway 400, past Barrie, and then onto smaller county roads that cut through farmland and patches of forest. The coordinates led me to a rural highway, 2 lanes of asphalt with fields on either side and the occasional farmhouse in the distance. I slowed as my GPS indicated I was getting close, looking for anything that might stand out. There was nothing, just an empty field bordered by a rusted wire fence, tall grass swaying in the breeze. No buildings, no signs, no historical markers. Just open land that looked like it hadn't been farmed in years. I pulled onto the shoulder and got out. The air was crisp and smelled like dried grass and distant wood smoke. A few crows called from a line of trees maybe a quarter-mile away, but otherwise it was silent. I felt stupid standing there on the side of the road, staring at an empty field because someone on the internet had posted coordinates with the word listen. But I'd driven all this way. Might as well see it through. I climbed over the fence, careful not to snag my jacket on the rusty wire, and walked into the field. The grass was knee-high in places, dried and yellow from the summer. The ground was uneven, with subtle rises and depressions that suggested this might have been cultivated land once, though it looked like it had been abandoned for decades. I stood in the middle of the field, listening. Wind in the grass, crows in the distance, the occasional car passing on the highway. Nothing unusual. Nothing that warranted the ominous listen instruction. I was about to head back to my car when I heard it. Voices. Faint at first, so faint I thought I was imagining it. But I held my breath and listened harder, and yes, there were voices. Multiple voices, overlapping, creating a low murmur that seemed to be coming from beneath my feet. I knelt down and pressed my ear closer to the ground. The sound was clearer now, definitely coming from underground. It was like listening to a crowd in another room, dozens of conversations happening at once, all bleeding together into an indistinct drone. I stood up and walked slowly across the field, listening. In some spots, the sound was barely audible. In others, it was louder, clearer, like I was standing over some kind of underground chamber or tunnel. I walked a grid pattern, trying to map out where the sound was strongest. There were no obvious explanations. No ventilation grates or maintenance access points, no industrial buildings nearby that might have underground facilities. Just an empty field with voices coming from beneath it. I pulled out my phone and started recording. I walked to the spot where the sound was loudest near the center of the field, marked by nothing except a slightly darker patch of grass, and stood there, holding my phone close to the ground. The voices continued their endless murmur. I recorded for about 5 minutes, then stopped and played it back. The voices were there on the recording, faint but definitely present. Multiple voices, all talking at once, creating that same overlapping drone. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the afternoon sun. This was real. Something was down there, beneath this field, producing the sound of dozens of people talking. I recorded for another 10 minutes, walking around the field, documenting the variations in volume and clarity. Then I climbed back over the fence and got in my car. I sat there for a moment, looking at the field, trying to come up with a rational explanation. Underground pipes carrying sound from somewhere else? some kind of acoustic phenomenon I didn't understand. But why would someone post these coordinates with the word listen if it was just plumbing or geology? I drove home, my mind churning with questions. When I got back to my apartment, I immediately plugged my phone into my computer and transferred the audio files. I put on headphones and played back the recording, increasing the volume and applying some basic noise filtering to see if I could make out what the voices were saying. And that's when I heard it clearly. They were reading names, not conversing, not talking over each other, reading names. Each voice was reciting a list of names in a flat, emotionless tone. John Anderson, Sarah Mitchell, David Chen, Emily Rodriguez. On and on, hundreds of names, maybe thousands, all being read simultaneously by different voices. I listened with growing horror as the names continued. Some of them I recognized common names, sure, but also specific ones. James Kowalski, Margaret O'Brien. Names I'd heard before, people I'd known or heard of, and then I heard my own name. It came about 12 minutes into the recording, spoken by one of the voices in that same flat, mechanical tone. My full name, first and last, pronounced correctly, clear as day. The moment after my name was spoken, the recording cut off. Just stopped, mid-word from another voice. I checked the file, it had been corrupted somehow. Everything after my name was gone. I sat there in my apartment, headphones on, staring at my computer screen. Someone or something underground in that field was reading lists of names, and my name was on one of those lists. I immediately went back to the Mapping Project website to look at the original post, to see if there were any comments or additional information. The post was gone, deleted. I searched the entire database for the coordinates, for any mention of Barry or that location. Nothing. I checked my browser history and found the original URL, but it returned a 404 error. The submission had been completely removed. Over the next few days, I became obsessed with understanding what I'd heard. I researched the area, looking for any historical information that might explain it. I found records of early settlements, farms that had existed in the 1800s and early 1900s. There had been a small community there once, though it had been abandoned when the railroad passed it by. I found a mention in an old newspaper archive about a disaster, a barn fire in 1923, that had killed several people during a community meeting. The article listed the names of the deceased. Some of them matched names I'd heard in the recording. I tried to find the field again. I drove back up to Barry twice, using my GPS to navigate to the coordinates I'd saved, but I couldn't find it. The coordinates would lead me to a stretch of highway, but the field I'd visited wasn't there. Instead, there were houses, a strip mall, a gas station. The landscape didn't match my memory at all. I wondered if I'd somehow saved the wrong coordinates, if my phone's GPS had glitched. But I remembered the drive clearly, remembered the empty field and the rusted fence. On my third attempt to find it, I stopped at a local historical society in Barry and asked if they knew anything about the area. An elderly volunteer looked at the coordinates and nodded. "That's where the old Simcoe settlement was," she said. "Most of it's been developed now, but there used to be farmland there. Why do you ask?" I didn't mention the voices. I just said I was interested in local history. She showed me some old photographs and maps, told me about the settlement and how it had thrived briefly before economic changes, and the fire had driven people away. "There's a memorial somewhere," she said, "for the people who died in the fire. I think it's in the old cemetery on County Road 27, if it's still there. Nobody visits it much anymore." I found the cemetery the next day. It was overgrown and neglected, headstones tilted and weathered. In the back corner, I found a stone memorial listing the names of those who had died in the 1923 fire. I counted them, 27 names. I went home and listened to my recording again, this time writing down every name I could clearly make out. It took hours, the voices overlapped, and the quality wasn't perfect. But I managed to transcribe maybe 200 names. 27 of them matched the memorial, but there were hundreds more. Names that weren't on that stone. Names that might have come from other graves in that cemetery, or other cemeteries, or other disasters and deaths that had never been memorialized. And my own name, which didn't belong to a dead person at all. I've tried to find that field again, but I never can. The coordinates lead me to places that don't match my memory, places that have been developed or never had empty fields to begin with. I've started to wonder if the coordinates themselves change, if that location exists in some in-between state that can't be reliably mapped. I still have the recording. I've listened to it dozens of times, and I keep hearing new names. Names I recognize from my hometown, from my school, from news stories about local deaths and accidents. The list seems to include anyone who has died in the region, going back generations. But why my name? I'm not dead. I'm here, alive, listening to this impossible recording of voices, reading names from beneath the earth. Unless the list isn't just of the dead, unless it's also of the dying, of everyone whose name will eventually be read in that flat, emotionless tone. Everyone who will join that chorus underground, reading names for whoever comes to listen. Sometimes I dream about that field. In the dreams, I'm standing in the tall grass again, and the voices are louder, clearer. I can hear them reading names continuously, an endless litany. And when I kneel down and press my ear to the earth, I can hear my own voice among them, reading names, including my own. I wake up from these dreams with the certainty that someday I'll find that field again, not because I'm looking for it, but because it will find me. And when I'm standing there, listening to those voices rise up from the ground, I'll understand finally what I'm hearing. Not a recording, not an echo, but a roll call, a list of everyone who has been and everyone who will be. Every name that has ever existed and every name that ever will, all being read simultaneously in the darkness beneath the earth. And my name is on that list, has always been on that list, will always be on that list. Read over and over in that flat, mechanical voice, until the day I join the chorus, until the day someone else stands in that field and hears my voice reading their name. I'd developed an interest in local history over the past year, collecting old newspapers and photographs from estate sales and antique shops. Most of it was worthless nostalgia, yellowed wedding announcements, grainy photos of people whose names had been forgotten. But occasionally I'd find something interesting, a glimpse into lives that had been lived and lost. That's how I justified browsing the dark web marketplace. I told myself I was looking for authentic historical artifacts, pieces of Ontario's past that hadn't made it into museums or archives. The marketplace was called Salvage and Remains, and its tagline promised authentic Ontario artifacts, historical items, antiques, things salvaged from abandoned buildings. Most of the listings were predictable: old bottles dug up from construction sites, vintage signs from closed businesses, furniture pulled from condemned houses. But I kept browsing, and eventually I found something that caught my attention. The listing was titled Personal Diary 1987, London, Ontario. The description was brief. Handwritten journal belonging to teenager, found in abandoned house during demolition. Approximately 200 pages, dated entries from January through October 1987, good condition, some water damage to final pages, $45. The photos showed a standard spiral-bound notebook, the kind high school students used, with a blue cover that had faded to gray. The handwriting visible in the sample pages was neat, feminine, the script of someone who'd been taught cursive properly. $45 seemed cheap for something that might offer a genuine window into a teenager's life in the 80s. I bought it without much thought, using cryptocurrency like the marketplace required, and provided a shipping address. It arrived 2 weeks later in a padded envelope with no return address. The notebook was exactly as described: a spiral-bound journal with a faded blue cover, the pages yellowed but intact. I could smell the mustiness of age and abandonment when I opened it. The first entry was dated the 3rd of January 1987. New year, new me. That's what everyone says, right? I'm going to write in this journal every day, document my life. Maybe someday it will be interesting. I settled into my reading chair and started from the beginning. The entries were exactly what you'd expect from a 16-year-old girl in the 1980s. School complaints, friend drama, crushes on boys, arguments with parents. She wrote about watching music videos on Much Music, about saving money for concert tickets, about the stress of upcoming exams. Her name was Jennifer, though she never wrote her last name. She lived in London, Ontario, on a street called Egerton. She mentioned it several times when giving directions to friends. She had a younger brother named Michael, parents who worked too much and didn't understand her, a best friend named Ashley who was dating a boy Jennifer didn't like. The writing was engaging, despite its mundane subject matter. Jennifer had a way with descriptions, an eye for small details that made her world come alive. I found myself invested in her teenage drama, hoping her crush would notice her, feeling her frustration when her parents grounded her for missing curfew. I read through January, February, March. The entries were consistently dated, one per day, sometimes short, and sometimes running several pages. By April, I felt like I knew Jennifer. I could picture her room, her school, the Tim Hortons where she and her friends hung out after class. Then, in late August, the tone began to change. The 23rd of August 1987, something weird happened today. I was walking home from Ashley's house, and I got this feeling like someone was watching me. I turned around a few times but didn't see anyone, probably just being paranoid. August 27. The feeling is back. I was in my room doing homework, and I suddenly felt like someone was outside, looking in. I went to the window, but there was no one there. Mom says I'm watching too many horror movies. September 4. First day back at school. Good to see everyone again. But that feeling of being watched hasn't gone away. If anything, it's gotten stronger. Sometimes I see someone out of the corner of my eye, but when I turn to look, there's nothing there. The entries continued, documenting Jennifer's growing sense of unease. She started closing her curtains even during the day. She took different routes home from school. She asked her parents to install better locks on the doors and windows. September 19. I know someone is watching the house. I can see them sometimes, standing across the street at night. Just a shadow, not moving, just standing there looking at my window. I told my parents, but Dad went out to check and said there was no one there. He thinks I'm making it up for attention. September 28. Ashley thinks I'm losing it. Maybe I am. But I know what I've seen. Someone is following me. They're always just out of sight, always in the periphery. I tried to photograph them, but the pictures never show anything. Just empty streets and shadows. I felt a chill reading these entries. Jennifer's fear was palpable in her handwriting. The letters became shakier, more erratic. She'd started pressing harder with her pen, the words sometimes cutting through the paper. October 5. They're getting closer. I saw them standing in our backyard last night, right outside my window, looking up. I screamed and Mom came running, but by the time she got there, they were gone. She's taking me to see a therapist. She thinks I'm having some kind of breakdown. October 10. The therapist wants to put me on medication, says I'm experiencing paranoid delusions. But I'm not crazy. I know what I've seen. They're real, and they're not trying to hide anymore. Last night they knocked on my window 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. When I looked, they were standing there in the yard, close enough that I could see their face in the light from my room, but it was wrong. Their face was wrong. I can't describe it. I drew the curtains and hid under my blankets until morning. The entries after that became more sporadic. Days would pass with no writing, then she'd add an entry that was brief and frightened. October 13. They know I'm alone. Mom and Dad went out for their anniversary. Michael is at a sleepover. I'm the only one here. I can hear them moving around outside, circling the house, testing the doors and windows. October 14. I didn't sleep at all last night. I stayed up with all the lights on, watching the windows. They were out there all night. Sometimes I could see them passing by the windows, their shadows blocking the streetlight. I called the police, but they said there was no one there when they drove by. They told me to stop making prank calls. And then the final entry, dated the 15th of October 1987. They're inside the house now. I can hear them on the stairs. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. The rest of the pages were blank. I sat there holding the diary, my heart pounding. The abrupt ending was disturbing enough, but there was something else. The handwriting in that final entry was barely legible, scrawled across the page like she'd been writing in the dark or in a panic. I checked the address she'd mentioned throughout the diary, Egerton Street in London, Ontario. I did a quick search and found the street easily. It was a residential area of older houses, nothing remarkable about it. Then I searched for missing teenager London, Ontario 1987 and immediately found what I was looking for. A newspaper article from the London Free Press, dated the 17th of October 1987. The headline read, "Teen girl missing from Egerton Street home." The article described how Jennifer Morrison, 16, had vanished from her home on the night of October 15. Her parents had returned from an anniversary dinner to find the house empty. Jennifer's bedroom window was open, though it had been locked when they left. There were no signs of a struggle. Police had searched the area but found no trace of her. Follow-up articles over the next few weeks documented the investigation. Jennifer's disappearance remained unexplained. There were no suspects, no leads, no evidence of foul play. The case eventually went cold. Jennifer Morrison was never found. I felt sick. This diary was real. These were the actual thoughts and fears of a girl who had disappeared 35 years ago, whose case had never been solved. The final entry, "They're inside the house now," those were possibly the last words she ever wrote. I reported it to the London police the next day, calling their non-emergency line and explaining what I'd found. They took my information and said they'd have a detective look into it. A week later, an officer called me back. "We've reviewed the diary," he said. "It's consistent with the Morrison case, and the handwriting appears to match samples we have from Jennifer's school records. However, there's no way to definitively prove it's authentic. It could be a fake created by someone familiar with the case details." "But what about the final entry?" I asked. "Doesn't that suggest someone was in the house?" "The house was thoroughly investigated at the time. There was no evidence of forced entry or struggle. The open window could have been how Jennifer left voluntarily." "You think she ran away?" "It's one theory. The diary entries about being watched could have been symptoms of mental health issues, as her parents suspected, or they could have been her way of justifying a planned disappearance. They kept the diary as potential evidence, though the officer made it clear they weren't reopening the investigation based on it alone. Too much time had passed. Too many questions that would never be answered. I told myself I'd done the right thing by reporting it, that Jennifer's family deserved to have this piece of her, even if it didn't provide closure. But I couldn't stop thinking about those final entries, about her growing terror, about whoever or whatever had been circling her house that night. And then strange things started happening in my own apartment. It began about a week after I'd given the diary to the police. I woke up one night around 3 in the morning, pulled from sleep by a sound I couldn't immediately identify. I lay there in the dark, listening. Footsteps. On the stairs leading to my second-floor apartment. Slow, deliberate footsteps, the old wood creaking under weight. I lived alone. The building had 4 units, and the other 3 were occupied by quiet tenants I rarely saw. No one should have been on my stairs in the middle of the night. The footsteps continued, climbing slowly. I waited for them to pass my door, to continue up to the 3rd floor, but they stopped right outside my apartment. I held my breath, listening. The hallway was silent. Then I heard 3 soft knocks on my door. Tap, tap, tap. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. After a long moment, the footsteps retreated back down the stairs. In the morning, I convinced myself I'd been dreaming, told myself it was just the power of suggestion after reading Jennifer's diary, my imagination creating echoes of her experience. But the footsteps came back the next night, and the night after that, always around 3 in the morning. Always the same pattern, slow steps climbing the stairs, stopping at my door, 3 soft knocks, then silence. Sometimes I'd work up the courage to look through the peephole, but the hallway was always empty. I started leaving lights on at night, started sleeping with my phone next to my pillow. I even set up a motion-activated camera in the hallway, but it never captured anything. The recording would show the empty hall, and then sometimes the sound of footsteps on the audio track, but no visible person or movement. I tried to find the marketplace seller who'd sold me the diary, thinking maybe they could tell me more about where it had been found, but their account had been deleted. The entire salvage and remains marketplace had gone offline, the URL returning a 404 error. The footsteps continued, every night without fail. 3 in the morning, footsteps on the stairs, 3 knocks on my door. I called the police about it, but what could they do? I had no evidence except audio recordings of footsteps. They suggested it might be another tenant or someone experiencing a medical episode, confused about which apartment was theirs. They said to call 911 if I ever felt threatened, but there was nothing they could do about footsteps in a public hallway. One night, about a month after the footsteps started, I worked up the courage to do something I'd been avoiding. When I heard the steps approaching, when I heard them stop at my door, I stood up and walked to the peephole. I looked out into the hallway. There was nothing there, just the empty hall, the light fixture casting its yellow glow, the other apartment doors closed and silent. But as I watched, I saw something that made my blood freeze. A shadow, just at the edge of my vision, where the hallway turned toward the stairs. A shadow that didn't match any object or person I could see. A shadow that was moving, shifting, like something was standing just out of view around that corner. I backed away from the door and haven't looked through the peephole since. The footsteps still come. Every night, same time, same pattern. I've gotten used to them now, the way you get used to any sound that repeats often enough. But I never forget what Jennifer wrote in that final entry, about hearing them on the stairs, about them being inside the house. And I wonder if buying that diary did more than just bring me a piece of history. I wonder if it brought something else. Something that had been following Jennifer, that had climbed her stairs and knocked on her door before she vanished. Something that's now climbing my stairs instead. I think about moving, but I'm afraid it would follow me. Whatever it is, wherever I go, because I read her words, I know her story. I'm connected to her now, somehow, across 35 years, and the space between life and whatever comes after. The footsteps are coming up the stairs right now. It's 3 in the morning. I can hear each slow, deliberate step. They're getting closer. Soon they'll stop at my door. Soon I'll hear those 3 soft knocks. Tap, tap, tap. And someday, I'm afraid, I'll hear what Jennifer heard. I'll hear them on the other side, inside, not outside. And I'll understand, finally, what happened to her that night in October 1987. But by then, it will be too late. I'd been fascinated by dead drops ever since I read about them on a dark web forum. The concept was simple but elegant. Instead of transmitting data digitally, where it could be intercepted and traced, people would leave physical USB drives in predetermined locations. Others would retrieve them, decrypt the contents, and leave their own drives in return. It was old-school espionage adapted for the digital age, and something about the physicality of it appealed to me. Most of the dead drop locations posted online were fake or had been compromised, picked clean by curious people like me or monitored by authorities. But I kept checking the forums, and one evening in late September I found a post that looked promising. Someone had posted coordinates for a location in Toronto, in a park near the waterfront, with a simple message: active drop, take what you find, leave what you want, standard encryption. The coordinates pointed to a specific bench in a small park overlooking Lake Ontario. I knew the area. I'd walked through there dozens of times on my way to and from the waterfront trail. It was a quiet spot, not heavily trafficked, perfect for a dead drop. I decided to check it out the next day. It was a Saturday afternoon, cool and overcast, with a sharp wind coming off the lake. The park was nearly empty, just a few people walking dogs and a couple sitting on a bench on the far side. I approached the bench, marked in the coordinates, and sat down, pretending to check my phone while I looked around. No one seemed to be paying attention to me. After a few minutes, I let my hand drop to the underside of the bench, feeling along the metal frame. My fingers found something, a small waterproof container, the kind people use for geocaching, attached to the bench with heavy-duty magnets. I pulled it free and slipped it into my jacket pocket, then stood and walked away casually, my heart beating faster. I'd actually found one, a real dead drop, right there in a Toronto park. I waited until I was home before opening the container. Inside was a USB drive, standard black plastic with no markings or labels. I held it in my hand for a long moment, considering the risks. Plugging an unknown USB drive into your computer was about as smart as accepting candy from strangers. It could contain malware, ransomware, or worse. But I was curious, and I'd taken precautions. I had an old laptop that I used specifically for things like this, isolated from my main network, running security software, and a virtual machine. If the drive contained anything malicious, it would be contained. I plugged it in. The drive showed up in my file explorer with 4.7 gigabytes of data, one folder labeled Found. I opened it. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, maybe 100 or more, all JPEG files with timestamps in the file names going back several months. I opened the first one. It showed a street corner in downtown Toronto, King and Bay, judging by the street signs visible in the frame. The photo was taken during the day, showing pedestrians crossing the intersection, cars waiting at the light, a typical Toronto street scene. I opened another, a subway platform, looks like Union Station based on the tile work. People waiting for a train, staring at their phones, lost in their own worlds. Another, inside a coffee shop, looked like a Starbucks, could have been anywhere. People sitting at tables with laptops, the counter visible in the background. I started clicking through them more quickly. All Toronto locations, all seemingly random. Street corners, parks, subway cars, shopping malls, office buildings. The photos were good quality, taken with a decent camera, but there was nothing obviously remarkable about them. Then I started to notice the pattern. In each photo, there was a person, not always in the foreground, not always obvious. Sometimes they were in the background, partially obscured. Sometimes they were just another face in the crowd. But as I went through the photos chronologically, I realized it was the same person appearing in all of them. A man, maybe in his 30s, average height and build, dark hair, clean-shaven, wearing different clothes in each photo, sometimes a suit, sometimes jeans and a jacket, sometimes casual weekend wear. Different locations, different times of day, different weather conditions, but always the same face. I went back through the photos more carefully, looking for him. He was in every single one. Sometimes he was looking away from the camera, seemingly unaware of being photographed. Sometimes he was partially hidden behind other people or objects, but he was always there, somewhere in the frame. The photos were dated over a period of 6 months. Hundreds of photos of this one person, captured going about his daily life across Toronto. Someone had been following him, documenting him, creating a comprehensive surveillance record of his movements and routines. I felt uneasy but also intrigued. Was this some kind of private investigation? A stalker's obsession? Some kind of art project? I clicked on the last photo in the folder. It was different from the others. This one was taken indoors, in what looked like someone's apartment. The man was sitting in a chair, facing the camera directly. His expression was completely blank, emotionless. Not scared, not angry, not defiant, just empty, like he was looking through the camera rather than at it. The photo was higher resolution than the others, clear enough that I could see details: the texture of his shirt, the stubble on his jaw, the way the light from a nearby window fell across his face, and his eyes, staring directly into the lens with that unsettling blankness. I closed the photo and sat back from my computer, unsettled. There was something wrong about this collection, something that went beyond simple surveillance. The progression from distant street photography to this final intimate portrait suggested something darker. I decided to delete the files. I'd satisfied my curiosity about dead drops, but I didn't want this person's documented life on my computer. I selected all the photos and hit delete. Error message. Cannot delete files. Permission denied. I tried again. Same error. I checked the file properties. They were set to read only. I changed the permissions and tried to delete them again. Cannot delete files. I tried moving them to the trash. No luck. I tried using the command line to force deletion. Nothing worked. Fine, I just format the entire drive. I right-clicked on the USB drive and selected Format, choosing the option to do a full format that would overwrite all data. The progress bar ran through to completion. Format successful. I opened the drive to verify it was empty. The folder was still there. Found. With all the same photos inside. I felt a chill run down my spine. That shouldn't be possible. A full format should have wiped everything. I pulled the USB drive from my computer and examined it. It looked completely normal, just a standard thumb drive. But somehow the files were persistent, resisting all attempts at deletion. I decided to destroy it. I took the drive to my workshop area and placed it on my workbench. I got a hammer and brought it down hard on the plastic casing, shattering it. I crushed the circuit board inside, breaking it into small pieces. I swept the fragments into a garbage bag and threw them in the dumpster outside my building. That should have been the end of it. 2 days later, I checked my mailbox and found a small padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a USB drive. Black plastic, no markings, identical to the one I'd destroyed. My hands were shaking as I brought it upstairs. I plugged it into my isolated laptop. One folder, found. I opened it. All the same photos were there. Hundreds of images of that man going about his life across Toronto. The chronological documentation of his movements, plus one new photo. The file name was dated from the previous day. I opened it and my blood ran cold. It showed me, sitting at my desk, looking at my computer screen. The angle was from outside, taken through my apartment window. I could see my face clearly in the monitor's glow, could see the reflection of whatever I'd been looking at on the screen. Someone had been outside my second-floor window, photographing me. I ran to the window and looked out. My apartment faced a quiet street with buildings across the way. Someone could have taken that photo from one of those buildings with a telephoto lens, but they would have needed to know which window was mine, would have needed to be watching, waiting. I closed the blinds immediately and backed away from the window. Over the next week, I tried everything to get rid of the files. I destroyed the second drive. A third one appeared in my mailbox. I stopped checking my mailbox. One appeared on my doorstep. I threw them away without looking. They kept coming, and each one had new photos. Photos of me leaving my building, photos of me at the grocery store, photos of me on the subway. Someone was following me now, documenting my movements the same way they documented that man in the original photos. I went to the police, but what could I tell them? That I'd found a USB drive in a park, and now someone was leaving more drives in my mailbox with photos of me. They took a report, said they'd look into it, but I could tell they didn't consider it a priority. No threats had been made, no laws had been clearly broken, just weird harassment. I moved apartments 3 months later, didn't tell anyone where I was going, changed my phone number, took a new route to work, tried to break every pattern in my life. The USB drive still found me. I'd come home and find one on my doorstep, in my mailbox, once, impossibly, inside my apartment, sitting on my kitchen counter when I knew I'd locked the door. Each drive contains the same found folder, the same hundreds of photos of that man whose life was documented in obsessive detail, and new photos of me, always getting closer, more intimate, photos taken inside coffee shops I visit, photos from the gym, photos that could only have been taken by someone following me closely, anticipating where I'd be. The most recent drive arrived last week. Along with the usual surveillance photos of me going about my daily routine, there was one new image that made my heart stop. It showed my apartment building, my current apartment, the one I'd moved to 3 months ago. The photo was taken from across the street, at night, and there, in my window on the 4th floor, was a silhouette, me, standing at my window, looking out. But that's not what terrified me. What terrified me was the timestamp on the photo. It was dated 3 days in the future. I'm writing this down because I need someone to know what's happening. I don't know who's doing this or what they want. I don't know what happened to the man in the original photos, though I've tried to find him, searched for missing persons reports that might match his face. Nothing. All I know is that the pattern continues. Someone documents a person's life in exhaustive detail. They compile hundreds of photos, tracking movements, establishing routines, and then something happens. The surveillance ends with that final photo, the subject sitting in a chair, looking at the camera with empty eyes. I'm afraid I know what comes next. I'm afraid that soon there will be a final photo of me, sitting in a chair, looking at the camera with that same blank, emotionless expression. And then these drives will find someone else. Another person will find coordinates for a dead drop, will retrieve a USB drive, will plug it in out of curiosity. They'll find a folder labeled "Found." They'll see hundreds of photos, and the pattern will continue. The drives keep coming. I can't escape them. And the worst part is knowing that somewhere out there, someone is watching, documenting, waiting, building a collection that will eventually include my final photo. I found another drive this morning. I haven't opened it yet. I'm afraid of what new photos it might contain, but I know I will. I always do. Because part of me needs to know, needs to see how close they're getting, needs to understand